So many times people ask me, what do you take for this? What's the protocol for this? And then name X condition that, that takes place afterwards. And guys, even sometimes people, they get upset at me that I just don't answer because a lot of times there just needs to be more context, number one. Number two, I've never looked at your labs. And number three, sometimes the explanation that is needed can be maybe a little bit longer than what people are looking for. So I want to answer this question tonight about what is the protocol. And a lot of times you're going to see online with health influencers that are going to talk about a protocol for fat loss. They're going to talk about a protocol for the thyroid. They're going to talk about a protocol for leaky gut. They're going to talk about a protocol for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, a protocol for quote unquote adrenal fatigue. And everybody is looking for the protocol. And one of the things that I want to go over with you is how to look at things differently. Okay. I'm going to show you it from a different perspective. So if you guys are looking for a protocol, I'm going to give you the perspectives that take place on certain health conditions when it comes to medicine, when it comes to even functional medicine, then when it comes to our approach, when it comes to the wellness way approach, because even with those two approaches, we look at it so differently than even how a functional medicine looks at it. And it depends on how you are looking at it, what perspective that you're coming from. When we look at things from a different perspective, people will yell, they'll say, you're wrong, you're wrong. Well, actually, I'm right. And from my perspective, and you're also right from your perspective. But once you start looking at a different perspective and start thinking a little bit differently, then you'll be able to say, okay, I understand that. That makes a lot of sense. So Dr. Nate, what is the protocol for whatever it might be? Insert your condition right here, especially. Now, if you guys are joining us right now, make sure that you say hello. Make sure you send a wave. Let me know where you're watching from. We have, I know, Australia, Arizona, Lake Okeechobee, Florida. Wow. So Sioux City, Iowa, we have a lot of people that are joining us right now. And I always love seeing people from all over the world that watch this. I'm sincerely humbled when you do watch. But guys, I haven't mentioned this a lot, but coming up on Saturday, this is February, I think it's 4th, which is a Saturday. The link to register is going to be right in the link at the top of the page. If you are on Instagram, if you are on Facebook, Dr. Nathan Thompson, or Facebook at Exemplify Health Center, you'll see the direct link to join and register via Eventbrite. The Wellness Way Journey to Weight Loss. This is really called the roadblocks to weight loss. And we're going to look at weight loss from a different perspective about how it should actually, first and foremost, be about getting your health back. And then number two, weight loss is the result. But we're going to talk about some of the roadblocks when it comes to how you exercise. It's going to come down to your liver. It's going to come down to your hormones, how your liver is actually metabolizing your hormones. And we're going to look at this from a different perspective. So this is going to be a webinar. Anybody can join from all across the world. I believe that the time is 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. Don't quote me on that. You can still register for the webinar and get the replay for 24 hours after that. So go to the top of the page, register for that. There is a cost involved, mainly because the streaming software that we use, and we only do this 1 or 2 times a year. It's pretty expensive to use, but that helps to cover the cost of our streaming software and webinar platform. So guys, I think right now we probably have 20 people that are registered for it. You can go to the top of the page, register on that Eventbrite link, and then join me for there. Once you register for it, about 24 hours before, we will email you the webinar link to directly join the room. And you'll also have access to the 24-hour replay. So this is going to be awesome, especially for me and a lot of people who suffer with some issues with weight loss. If you saw a picture of me when I was 33 years of age, you would say, oh, wow. And I never blamed it on my genes. I never blamed it on somebody else. It was 100% my fault. And once I took 100% responsibility, then and only then was I able to overcome even some of my issues. Because guys, in my family, obesity is a big issue. And so it was one of those things where I just thought that was how I was supposed to be. And nothing could be further from the truth. So guys, get registered. Wellness Way Journey to Weight Loss. I know that we already have, I think we're at capacity for the inflammation talk. That's going to be here tomorrow night at 6:00 p.m. If you're watching right now, you're registered for it. I can't wait to see you there. But we will also be having one towards the end of February, I believe February 23rd as well. So if you're from the Chicagoland area, you can get registered for that as well. This is an in-person event. Let's talk about perspective, guys, because if you're watching this, about seeing it from a different perspective. One of the things that we always say is and we talk about it, the fireman and carpenter principle, because I've made statements that said, hey, here's why I don't ice. So I've had a grade 2 tear of my hamstring, and I was like, you know what, even if the principle works or it doesn't, I'm not going to ice it at all. So rather than ice it, try to inhibit healing, I let it go, let it swell, let it get, bleed. And it looked really, really bad. But when people are saying, hey, it takes 4, 6, 8 weeks to recover from that, I was actually back to full participation in about 10 days. And one of the things you never, ever want to do, guys, is you never want to inhibit acute inflammation. Chronic inflammation is something that is different. That's what we talk about at the inflammation talk. But, when people are having a health crisis, sometimes you need the fire department, which would actually be medicine. I have no problems with people using medicine as a fire department in order to put the fire out. But where the problem is that we use the fire department in order to rebuild our house. So that is not necessarily a good thing to do, because the fire department is not trained on how to rebuild the house. You need a carpenter for that. And so when you see people, you say, well, doc, we're living longer than ever before. I'm like, I agree. And the reason why is that we're really good at putting out fires. Here in the United States, in medicine, they're the best as far as putting out fires. But you know what we're the worst at? Figuring out why it happened, number one, and then number two, rebuilding the house after the fire has been put out. And see, the problem is, guys, if you never rebuild your house after fire, all you do is you live in a sick and decaying house. And that's what's happening in the United States. We have more years of life that's chronically ill more than anywhere in the entire world. And so we're so good at putting out fires, but then we just live our life chronically ill. We're living in a sick house. And so if you looked at a fireman and you looked at the carpenter, they both look at, the day after the fire, the fireman's going to look at that house and they're going to say, wow, I did a really good job. The carpenter is going to look at the same exact, house, and they're going to say, we have such a mess. Holy cow. And who's right? They both are, because it's a matter of perspective. And guys, even when you look at this right here, two people looking at the same number, one person says it's a 6, the other one says it's a 9. They're both right, because it is all a matter of perspective. And guys, when we have so many health problems in the United States, and if you think about it, is heart disease better or worse? Is cancer better or worse? Is infertility better or worse? Is thyroid issues better or worse? Autoimmunity better or worse? Everybody knows that it's getting worse. And so if it's getting worse, maybe we should start looking at things from a different perspective, because I think it was Einstein that said, you cannot solve your problems with the same level of thinking that created the problem. So all we're doing is saying, let's advance the scientific process and maybe look at it from a different perspective. So it actually takes me back to Semmelweis, who said, hey guys, you should be washing your hands when you deliver a baby. Stop going to working on cadavers straight into deliver a baby without washing your hands, because I made an observation that, that these mothers after birth were dying of infection. They were getting the fever and then dying of infection. Maybe my observation is if you wash your hands, maybe that would help. And what's interesting is that this scientist, this medical doctor, was ridiculed and actually thrown into an insane asylum, because the doctors didn't want to actually admit that washing your hands would have been something that would have been beneficial. So it's interesting how getting a new idea into a quarter inch of a skull can take generations in order for that to happen. But guys, one of the things that I want to encourage you is, when you are presented with new information, how do you respond? When you're presented with new information, how do you respond? Do you mock? Do you call names? Because that is literally the definition of being a child and being no different than your children. And so it comes down to maturity, because what do we need to do in order to help people get better, enjoy life? Well, sometimes we need to start looking at things from a different perspective. And if it pains you so much to look at things from a different perspective, then maybe you should figure out why you're hanging on to that so much. So it's just a matter of perspective. So let's go ahead and let's take some health conditions and let's look at it from a different perspective. So for example, let's look at high blood pressure. One of the questions that I ask people is, hey, is high blood pressure good or bad? And immediately people say, well, high blood pressure is terrible. And I say, okay, well, let me give you a situation. Let's say that you step outside, you're going to go get mail at your mailbox. And when you step outside, you look to your right and there's a giant grizzly bear that's right there. And it looks at you like it is his next lunch. Now, at that point, understanding that a grizzly bear is about to kill me, do you think your blood pressure is going to go up? The answer is yes. Well, would it be necessarily bad? And the answer is not at all, because you immediately go into fight or flight, in which you're going to get an elevation of blood pressure so that you can pump nutrients to your extremities at a much faster level in order to run faster, jump higher, to be able to provide immediate and long-term energy to be able to run away from the bear. So at that point, we wouldn't say, you know what, bear, blood pressure, high blood pressure is not good for me. Let me go ahead and take my beta blocker first. So when it comes to high blood pressure, is it good or bad? Well, actually, if it's a stress response and it's needed, it's good. And when it becomes bad is actually when it never, ever goes away. So if you walked into the doctor and the doctor takes your blood pressure and says, listen, Bill, you have high blood pressure. So one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to need to put you on either an ACE inhibitor, calcium channel blocker, diuretic, or maybe even a beta blocker. All of them have a different mechanism of action. And so it takes that blood pressure, it takes the blood pressure medication, blood pressure goes down, retakes your blood pressure, let's say 4 weeks later, and says, we got it. Yep, we got to go on this, this blood pressure medication. It worked. You need to be on it forever. Okay. And that's what they'll say is you need to go on it forever. But one of the things they don't tell you is even though that will lower blood pressure, is then you start to have more effects. They're not called side effects. They're called effects. And in fact, when it comes to drugs, everything is an effect. Lower blood pressure is an effect, but so is things like constipation, headache, palpitations, dizziness, rash, drowsiness, fatigue, flushing, nausea, swelling in the feet and lower legs, diabetes, gout, muscle cramps, potassium deficiency, and loss of taste, which over the last 3 years, people would have said, congratulations, I think you have COVID, all right? So what do you have when you take that? You're putting out one fire, but then as a result, you develop then more fires, and then voila, well, we also have another drug for that as well. So if you're watching this right now, you may be at the point where you say, yeah, doc, I get it. I understand it. Can I have something more natural? And that's where a lot of people are at, in which they're going to say, well, I'm going to go visit a functional medicine doc. And what they'll do instead is say, well, one of the things that I heard is, hey, if you, increase your B12, if you take some fish oils, 3 grams of fish oils, the EPA, DHA per day, take some CoQ10 in order to counteract the cholesterol medication that they have you on, and then take some magnesium and some potassium. And then if you do that and it lowers the blood pressure, then you say, well, I guess that worked. I say, well, wait a second, not so fast, because, and by the way, we call that the Dr. Oz effect, which, back in the day, Dr. Oz would say, hey, you need to take red rice yeast, for high cholesterol, and it will lower cholesterol. And you say, well, now you just need to be on red rice yeast for the rest of your life. It's still a fire department approach, but it's just more natural. And people say, well, are there any side effects while taking fish oils and CoQ10 and magnesium and potassium and things like that? I say, well, not really, other than if you don't stay on them, the blood pressure is just going to start to go back up. Which the only biggest drawback behind that is the hit that your pocketbook takes. And trust me, I've had people come in still sick on literally 34 different supplements. And the reason why is because the primary thing has never, ever been addressed, and that is going to be inflammation. So how do we look at blood pressure? Well, we ask the question first and foremost is, why on earth is the blood pressure high? And when you look at what causes high blood pressure, it is due to inflammation, otherwise known as a stressor. So there's got to be chemical, there's got to be physical, there's got to be mental stressors. And in fact, even the CDC admits that most doctors' visits are due to mental stress. And in fact, even the mechanism of action of different blood pressure medications, one of them is a beta blocker that works at the neurological component of your adrenal gland because it blocks the release of adrenaline, which is released in fight or flight. So we don't want to just say, let's manipulate blood pressure. Yeah, you may need to work on getting it down, but in the meantime, let's start figuring out what the cause is. What are the stressors that are at play? Where are they happening on a chemical level? Where are they happening on a physical level? And where are they happening on a mental level? And sometimes it's one, sometimes it's two, and many times it can be all three. And how do you know what can be one of the drivers when it comes to high blood pressure? Guys, it is just testing. It is not guessing about it. And so that's why when people say, Dr. Nate, what is the protocol? I say, well, get your tests first. So then people say, well, what are all the tests that I need to do? But many times the tests that you think you need are not the tests necessarily that I will order for you. But then the other thing is, guys, is okay, let's say you get the test. Now the question is what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with that test? What about the immune system? So what about the immune system? I want you to think of most illnesses that are taking place are either have an inflammatory immune component to it, or there's a mental stress component to it. Those are the two biggest drivers that are causing illness. And I want you actually to think of this, because when you look at medicine, how we look at the immune system and how medicine looks at the immune system is the difference between seeing something and saying it's a 6 and looking at it from a different perspective and saying that it's a 9. Because if you take cancer, for example, again, when you look at cancer, cancer ultimately is a failure of the immune system. And in fact, they'll say if you have cancer, the answer is chemotherapy. Guys, all chemotherapy is doing is it's doing the job that the immune system failed to do. Don't believe me? Look at Guyton and Hall's medical textbook of physiology, and they say the purpose of the immune system is actually to fight infection and also to suppress tumors, like your CD8 cells. And so when someone undergoes chemotherapy, it really is just helping along what the immune system was unable to keep up with. Even when you do chemotherapy and you kill off cells, you still need the immune system component to clean up the dead tissue. And so with a low immune system from a cancer perspective, it's chemotherapy. Dr. Nate, are you saying you should never do chemotherapy? Actually, there are times where I'm like, this is out of control. You need some help when it comes to this. There are tests that you can actually look at and say, God, you need some outside help when it comes to you actually lowering your tumor volume or your tumor burden as much as possible. If you look at autoimmunity and the immune system, what they're going to say is that the immune system is attacking your own body. And I want you to think of it. We're biologically programmed for survival. We are not biologically programmed for our body to attack itself. And even when you think about it, guys, if this is a genetic issue, why hasn't it skyrocketed over the last 40 to 50 years? And why is the number of autoimmune conditions going up over 100 now that they can see there's autoantibodies for different types of tissues? And why is it continuing to get worse and worse and worse? Don't believe me? Well, go and watch commercials and you'll see about every 5th or 6th commercial with something that is considered an immunosuppressant, corticosteroids, immune system modulators. And guys, when you look at something like methotrexate, for example, and you look at some of these things that are designed to suppress an inflammatory response, you will see that, hey, one of the long-term effects is cancer. Who says so? They do. So you're trading in lowering an inflammatory response for cancer later on in life. If you look at heart disease, for example, heart disease is an inflammatory condition. What's so interesting is if they say that autoimmunity is the body attacking itself, well, then what would you call heart disease? because it's an inflammatory condition. You have an inflammatory process that's happening around the endothelial lining of your arteries that then when there's damage, you're going to have a foam cell response by what are known as macrophages, and that response will cause deposition of plaquing in through that area. What's the plaquing? It's the cholesterol. It's there to repair. But they're going to say, no, it's the cholesterol that's causing the damage. And I'm saying, well, then why is it getting deposited there? There has to be an inflammatory trigger for that to happen. So you look at allergies. So people will have an overactive immune system response. Then they're going to say, well, I want you to take antihistamines. If you have a bacteria, then you're going to take antibiotics for it. If you have a virus, they used to say, well, you're just nothing you can do, just go home and rest. But now, for example, over the last couple of years, it's now mass social distance and take a bunch of what. And so even when you look at methotrexate, for example, which is a drug that they give for certain autoimmune conditions, you also have more effects like flushing, rash, itchiness, dizziness, headache, loss of breath, facial swelling, back, stomach, and chest pain, nosebleeds, bleeding gums, hair loss, blood clots, infertility, and yes, even cancer as well. Now, to some people, they're like, well, that's my only option. I say, are you certain that it's the only option? You have to ask yourself the question, what if my body wasn't attacking itself? What if it's actually trying to clean up damaged tissue? And maybe I should look and see what is actually triggering the immune system, i.e. damaged tissue. What could be causing that tissue damage? But then when we take it to the next more natural approach, then one of the things that we do, especially when it comes to boosting of the immune system for a virus or for a bacteria, they would say, hey, you can boost your immune system by just taking a bunch of vitamin C, vitamin D, elderberry, echinacea, and zinc. A lot of people were doing certain protocols for a long period of time, in order to try to keep their immune system boosted. I will say this time and time again, guys, you cannot boost your immune system. You can, however, get it up to sufficiency, and sufficiency, in my opinion, is more than enough. This has been demonstrated. But there's a lot of people when they start doing some of these protocols, and there's some things that people have been doing, and I said, you do realize that some of these things that you have been taking for long periods of time, like taking high dose zinc, will actually cause copper deficiency. Now you're going to run into another set of problems. Or for people who are taking N-acetylcysteine or some of these other things, and I'm looking at this and looking at hormone pathways, and I'm like, you do realize that this inhibits certain hormone pathways, elimination pathways within the liver. And this was true with some people who had a history of breast cancer as well. But when we start taking supplements, just this for that, well, we start to fly blind. And it's like shooting an arrow, at a target with our eyes covered. You may hit the target, but you're not going to be very accurate. And it's also the saying that I always say that even a blind squirrel can find a nut every now and then. And so you may be right with some of the things, but the problem is that it really is just leaving it up to chance. So when you talk about the immune system from the Wellness Way perspective, we ask the question, well, where is the immune system sufficient or insufficient? Because yes, you can test every cell of the immune system. CBC with a differential, you can see CD56 cells, you can see CD19, you see CD8, CD4, and your CD8 plus CD4 is known as your CD3 cells. These are actually measuring a response to viruses and also tumor suppression. So you look at this and you say, well, where on earth is the immune system sufficient? Or if someone has autoimmunity, we say, well, why is it suppressed, or why is it overactive in this case? Why is it going after this particular type of tissue? And then we ask the question, how can we reduce especially chronic inflammation and help to rebuild and start to support that immune system? The answer is first by starting by testing and not guessing. Now, even if you take it further, guys, and you look at type 2 diabetes, and in fact, I had two people just today, we did a retest on them. One was pre-diabetic, and within about 3.5 months was no longer pre-diabetic, but now had A1C under 5.7. Actually, I believe it was at 5.6. Glucose down, triglycerides down, all of those things down. But if she would have continued to trend and continue to do the same things, well, insulin resistance turns into pre-diabetes, turns into type 2 diabetes. And then you enter into a system of taking metformin, then you go into your GLP-1 agonists, and then finally, when that fails, because they're not getting to the cause and it's exacerbating an insulin resistance issue, and finally, you're going to start taking insulin. We had an older gentleman, 76 years of age. We saw his average blood sugars went from 290 down to 180 in a matter of about 4 months. And this has never happened in his life. Joint pain, he's still a type 2 diabetic. He still has a lot of work to do, but no more joint pain, starting to exercise more frequently. And even when we took a new test, people say, well, what did you do in order to lower the blood sugars? Well, what we did for the one individual that was pre-diabetic and no longer pre-diabetic to one who's type 2 diabetic, better, but still type 2 diabetic, the protocol was much different. And that's because we actually tested. But guys, even if you look at metformin, which oftentimes is considered the first line of defense when it comes to type 2 diabetes, is the effects are diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, bloating, headache, increasing insulin resistance, and then leading to more medications. If you don't believe me, go to WebMD, look up metformin, and look at the reviews on WebMD. Excuse me, you'll see that it doesn't have very good reviews. And in fact, one of the biggest things that people say is that they get diarrhea and nausea by taking it. And so, then we're saying, well, let's go to a functional medicine doctor. And then without testing, it's, well, just eat more whole foods, start exercising, start to do a calorie restriction diet. Yeah, you might be able to take some golden seal, which is a berberine that has a very similar mechanism of action of metformin, maybe increase your vitamin D, a little bit, but there's no testing that's involved. And in fact, I've even heard some doctors say that diabetes has really nothing to do with your blood sugar. It's just you're eating too many calories. So it just comes down to, and even guys, when a doctor goes over lifestyle advice, it says, well, just eat less calories and start exercising more. But in this particular gentleman who actually was exercising, I said, you don't need long duration exercise. You actually need to make the cells want to soak up sugar as much as possible. And that can only happen by doing very high intensity, short duration exercise. If you don't believe me, look up PubMed about high intensity exercise and insulin resistance. There's a lot of articles out there, and start looking at it from a different perspective, even how you are exercising. But when it comes to type 2 diabetes, we ask the question, well, why are blood sugars elevated in the first place? Sometimes it's not just the overconsumption of carbohydrates. Sometimes it can actually lead to a chronic elevated stress response. Is there a mental component to it? Absolutely. It can actually be caused by a problem with the microbiome, and you're not producing enough short chain fatty acids. So it can be mental, it can be chemical, it can even be physical. So I've had people's blood sugar go way down even after adjusting them, and they thought I was doing some kind of voodoo quackery witchcraft. But guys, it actually makes sense, because one of the best things that a chiropractic adjustment that's properly applied can do is lower a sympathetic stress response. And so that's why you have to look at the physical, the mental, and the chemical. So you have to ask, well, is this sugar related? Is this carbohydrate related? Is it stress hormone related? Is it gut health related? Can it be helped with certain types of fitness? And a lot of times I tell people walking's not going to cut it. Getting on a recumbent bike for 30 minutes is not going to cut it. You should be doing this very specific if you want this to start to reduce that much quicker. And how do you know that? Well, you test. And this is why when it comes to type 2 diabetes, it's not looking at just blood sugar. It's not looking at just your A1C, but it's also looking at your insulin levels. Going back to the woman who was pre-diabetic, no longer pre-diabetic, Her insulin levels went from 19, which is considered high, and it has dropped down to 6. And so, and even despite that, her sugars were still able to decrease, even having a lower insulin response, which really is about insulin sensitivity, the ability of the cells to be able to hear that hormonal input of insulin. So what about things when it comes to your fertility hormones? Guys, we have a big time issue when it comes to fertility now. There's a lot of people who can't conceive. The problems just didn't start when you want to have a baby. Many of the problems are actually starting when girls are in their teens, and this can also be a male problem as well. So even if you just talk about your fertility hormones, guys, it's if people run some tests and they run a lab, they look at estradiol, for example, or they're looking at progesterone and say, well, you just need to be on progesterone replacement. So hormone replacement therapy, especially guys after menopause, or if the girl's younger, putting her on birth control to see if it helps normalize or regulate the menstrual cycle, many times without even testing a couple of hormones, but there are a lot of hormones that you should be testing for. And then also for men, it's like doing one marker that says, all right, let's look at your testosterone. It's low. You just need to be on testosterone replacement therapy without ever asking the question why. So if you look at the effects of doing that with women, women can have problems with breast tenderness, breast cancer. Guys, part of the huge contribution of breast cancer over the last 30 years had to do with hormone replacement therapy. And the reason why is because if you are giving estrogens and not measuring how they're getting metabolized at the liver, they can go down certain pathways that are very mutagenic to the breast tissue. So breast tenderness, breast cancer, hair loss, weight gain, headaches, strokes, bloating. Guys, who says that strokes, that women have an increased risk of strokes by taking birth control? The package insert actually says that. Men, if you are having problems with your hormones, you can have things like hair loss, testosterone to DHT, prostate swelling, testosterone converted into DHT, breast growth, especially if you are taking testosterone replacement therapy and the mechanisms are already there to aromatase from testosterone into estradiol, but they have another medication for that. Acne and even heart disease. You get your testosterone elevated to a certain level, and it puts you at a much higher risk for heart disease. It's one of the reasons why men have a higher incidence of heart disease than women do before a woman hits menopause, because of the protective effect of estrogens on that inflammatory process. Ladies, if you have the same sassy behavior that a man does, once you hit menopause, you will quickly catch up. And the answer isn't going on hormonal replacement therapy. The answer is always trying to get to the reason why it's happening in the first place. So even if you look at many functional medicine doctors, they may measure your estradiol, they may just measure your progesterone, your testosterone, but the answer is, let's go ahead and put people on some bioidentical hormones. Maybe ladies, just go ahead and take some black cohosh, maybe some ashwagandha as well to help support the adrenal glands. But guys, it's an incomplete picture. Dr. Nate, are you saying that you're 100% against bioidentical hormones? Actually not, because one of the problems is that when a woman has a hysterectomy prior to reaching menopause, they absolutely should be going on a bioidentical hormones, because once you have the ovaries removed prematurely, it all goes to the adrenal glands as far as hormone production. And that is going to put a lot of stress long-term on the adrenal glands. And so in those cases, we do recommend that people should go on some form of bioidentical hormones in order to just try to keep her hormone levels up until it is time that they should be in menopause. So when it comes to fertility hormones, we always will say this, guys, that hormones will make you feel lousy, but reality is they're not the reason why you're sick. Hormones are responding to stressors. Hormones, again, are responding to stressors. There needs to be a stressor in order to change up or down hormone function. So we say, well, what's happening with mental stress? Progesterone can be very low when it comes to a woman having a high amount of mental stress. We also say hormones will also become very low in adaptation when you are having something in through the immune system, some inflammatory process, infection, things like that. And we also understand that you were programmed to reproduce. Your body is biologically programmed to reproduce. And I always laugh when someone tries to tell me that infertility is genetic. And just think about that for just a second. The answer of where you start off at is that you test and you don't guess, but you need to test completely. I remember I did a video, this was probably about a month ago. We asked the question, should women have a six-pack? I said, no, you really shouldn't. And a lot of women said, well, I have a six-pack and my hormones are perfect. And I said, well, have you gotten them tested? Well, yes, I've gotten them tested. Show me what your tests are. And many times it's that maybe estradiol and progesterone. And I say, hey, that's cool. Where's the rest of them? And I say, I didn't know that there was any more. And I'm saying, yep, you should be measuring blood progesterone. You should be measuring DHEA. You should be measuring testosterone free and total. You should be measuring estriol, estrone. And then you should go and then look at metabolism by looking at the urine and then look at how they're going down what are known as the 2 and 4 hydroxy and methoxy pathways as well. So guys, when people say my hormones are perfect, I'm 99% certain that you haven't measured it the way that we are in fact actually looking at it. So moving on to the thyroid, and guys, I'm going to talk more about the thyroid next week. I'm going to do a 2-part series because the thyroid is one of the most misunderstood endocrine organs, especially when it comes to medicine. And if someone has a thyroid issue, usually the doctor just measures TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. And I tell usually a person, they say, my thyroid's fine because my TSH is fine. And I said, well, you do realize that TSH is not a thyroid hormone, it's a brain hormone. It's a pituitary hormone. And they're absolutely just flabbergasted. So usually the doctor is just measuring TSH, and they're only going to recommend to do something unless that TSH is bullet high. Sometimes they'll even measure T4 as well on some occasions. But the answer for a thyroid issue, for hypothyroidism, for example, is to go on Synthroid, which is a thyroid replacement. Okay. The question I always ask a person is when they've been taking Synthroid for long periods of time is first I'll say, where's the rest of your labs? And they say, I don't have them. They were never measured. Why didn't the doctor measure them? Well, the reason why is because why would they measure something when the answer is always more Synthroid? So that's why they're only measuring 1, 2 at tops 3 different markers when it comes to the thyroid. But you would be amazed at how many women come in and say, I thought this was going to be my solution. I thought the reason why I didn't feel good was because it was my thyroid. They looked and they saw that my TSH was high. They put me on Synthroid. They said it's going to take care of all of your problems. But why do I still feel awful? Okay. So why do I still feel awful? So the question is did they measure cortisol? Answer is no. And that's why so many women actually still feel very awful because they're not actually measuring T4, T3, antibodies, and other markers as well. So even when you go to a functional medicine doctor, they may even measure TSH, T3, T4. They may measure antibodies, TGA, TPO antibodies. And then they say, well, let's go ahead and give you some selenium. Let's give you iodine. Let's give you adrenal support. Let's give you desiccated thyroid, as well. And so, and still, despite that, you may say, oh, my thyroid numbers went back to normal. But still, guys, is it getting to the reason why the thyroid started to become hypoactive in the first place? And when we look at the thyroid, for example, we're saying there's major, many things that can take place that can cause a decrease in thyroid function. I'll talk more about it next week. So most of the time, hypothyroid is related to an immune reaction. Is it an interference problem? Is it a production problem? Is it a transport problem? And yes, estradiol plays a role in transport problems. And if you're looking at a proper test, then it should have 16 markers on it when you are properly addressing the thyroid. A lot of people like say, oh my gosh, well, why didn't they test it? Because the solution is always the same. It is take a thyroid replacement versus trying to figure out why it's happening. Now, do some people actually need to be on thyroid replacement? Yes, because they have had an immune system reaction, autoimmune destruction, because the immune system says we got some damaged tissue here and we need to clean it out. I'll do that now at the expense of causing some thyroid damage. It's not attacking itself, but what it's doing instead is saying we need to clean out this tissue. Really no different than if you sprained your ankle, okay? So the biggest thing that I want to tell you, just that looking at just these things, is there is no protocol, guys. And if you were watching because you want to know what the protocol actually is there is no protocol. There is no this for that. Guys, that's medicine. High blood pressure, take a med. If you have another symptom, take another med for it. And it's the same thing, what we call the Dr. Oz effect. If you have high cholesterol, just take this for it, and it's more natural. But the biggest thing that I want to tell you guys is that there is no magical herb. There's no magical supplement. There's not something that you have yet to discover in the deep Amazon rainforest that are going to revolutionize your health. And guys, we fall for this all the time, hook, line, and sinker, is that some of these things, they may help you, but they're not going to revolutionize your life. I've never seen a supplement that is going to completely change your life. And if it did, it was because you were so deficient in it. And that was the one reason why you started to feel better. So we have to stop looking for the miracle supplement, the miracle protocol. Actually, where it starts by handling and addressing inflammation first and foremost. So what does it look like? Number one, you always test. Number two, you have to reduce the inflammatory stressors. Number three, reduce inflammation. Number three, reduce the different stressors that are taking place. This is the beauty, guys, of chiropractic. It says, hey, we have the ability to be well. We don't get well because we are over inundated with physical, mental, and chemical stressors. And the body then goes into an adaptation process. And then once you reduce the stressors, you have to provide sufficiency to be able to rebuild and repair. And then, like with everyone, then we retest. And sometimes we retest 2 times. Sometimes we retest 3 times. And so we're trying to retest in order to see how is the body adapting back into health versus adapting into a disease state. And so looking at that, it's just that we're looking at it from a different perspective. So here's a different perspective. Ask yourself this question, and this may help you start the process of you looking at it differently. What if your body wasn't making a mistake? Let me say that again. What if your body wasn't making a mistake? What if it was just trying to adapt to help you survive? So what if your hormones were just adapting? What if your thyroid was just adapting? What if your immune system was adapting? What if your blood pressure was adapting? What if your insulin resistance was adapting to protect your cells from so much oxidative damage that takes place when you're consuming so many processed carbohydrates? What if the body is saying, I'm going to protect you now with a long-term consequence of it hurting you later? And that's the decision that the body will always make. I'm going to save you now with a long-term consequence. But once you start looking at it this way, then maybe we can start to solve the health problems that no one has any kind of answers for. So hopefully, guys, just so you know, there is no protocol. The protocol is based on you. Protocol is based on testing. And that's one of the reasons why, if you ask me, what do you take this for that? I probably, with all due respect, I won't answer you. So guys, if you've been watching this up to this point, thank you so much for watching. And if you are from anywhere, whether it be from the United States, whether it be from Europe, whether it be from Canada, whether it be from Australia, wherever it might be, you can join us on this webinar coming up this Saturday. I believe the date is February 4th. I also believe that the time is at 9 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time. go to the link above, or if you're watching on Instagram, just go to the link that we have provided, and you will see upcoming events. You'll see the direct link on our Facebook page, The Wellness Way Journey to Weight Loss, and will help you see weight loss from a different perspective. And so you'll be able to watch in on that and be able to see the perspective we have when it comes to weight loss and even how we test. All right. So guys, I hope you have a great evening. I hope that you have a great rest of your week. Next week, we're going to talk about this right here. There's no such thing as a thyroid problem, and I'll explain that deeper. And I'll go over with you. This will be a 2-part series. So I'll go over the first part coming up next week, probably around at the same time. So guys, I hope you're well. I hope you be blessed. And I hope you remember who you are.